My name is Brianne Bales. I'm the manager for the Homeless Contribution Income Tax Credit, or HCTC is the acronym that I'll be referring to the program throughout this presentation. We also have Lonnie Silva on the call. Lonnie is our program assistant for HCTC and other programs within the Office of Homeless Initiatives. We do have a packed agenda today. So I'll go ahead and share those expectations. Please, to start off, please put your name, email address, and organization name in the chat. So this is not a webinar format where we requested that information in advance. This is more of a drop-in of those who are interested in this information. So please go ahead and put your name, email address, and organization name in the chat. We can share follow-up materials with you. So thank you for providing that. I'm going to start off with an overview of HCTC, as well as information about what projects are for HCTC. I'm going to briefly review our contribution and certificate process within the program. The reason I'm going to review this is really to explain the administrative capacity that's needed in order to administer the HCTC within your organization, to just really determine, how this might be a good fit for your organization as far as your staffing and capacity in comparison to the benefits financially of participating in HCTC. Also talk about some of our requirements regarding monitoring and reporting. And then finally, I will review briefly some of our eligibility application information, and we'll have time at the end of the presentation for any questions you have regarding things as well. So we'll go ahead and get started on this. Some of you may have more or less knowledge about HCTC, so I'll go ahead and give kind of a landscape of where HCTC lands within the state. So we have the Colorado Department of Local Affairs kind of as the broader department. And then the Division of Housing within DOLA really focuses on housing opportunities for the state. And within DOH, there's the Office of Homeless Initiatives. So it really focuses on collaborating with nonprofits and other stakeholders to make homelessness rare, brief, and one time in Colorado. And so HCTC is really just a part of that mission. And HCTC is meant to catalyze and strengthen statewide efforts to address the effects of homelessness through private investment in service providers for those experiencing homelessness. So I'll go in a little bit more into what that actually means throughout the presentation. HCTC began in January 1st, 2023 for that 2023 tax year. It came from the 2022 House bill that was passed that created this tax credit. HCTC did replace a previous tax credit through the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. That was called the Enterprise Zone tax credit, and it did have an option for homeless serving programs as projects within that tax credit program. And so some of our current HCTC participants were participating in that previous tax credit, but due to some of the expansion with HCTC, we were not looking at specific locations of enterprise zones. For example, more nonprofits have been able to participate in HCTC, which is a good thing. So actually in this year, we did have a Senate bill passed as well that changed some of the requirements with HCTC and helped a couple of the administrative kinks that we went through our first year. And so those changes have been implemented as of now. So So yeah, that was a positive thing that happened this year. Just to explain about what a tax credit is, it is a reduction in the Colorado state income taxes owed by a taxpayer. So it is different from a charitable tax deduction. It's just basically an immediate benefit when someone files their taxes. They can receive a percentage of their donation back as a reduction in how much they owe for their Colorado state taxes. So basically, HCTC is a benefit because approved organizations can issue tax credits to their donors who make qualifying contributions to qualifying HCTC projects. So that really begs the question, why HCTC? Why do some organizations like to participate? So some of the benefits that organizations have found is that there's an incentive for larger donations. So maybe you have a donor who gives every year or every month. HCTC can be an incentive to increase that amount because they're going to be automatically getting a portion of that back as a credit. It could also be an incentive for new donors who are thinking about supporting your mission, but maybe they also look at the financial benefit of having the credit make their dollars go even further for them. So there's also some organizations have found a greater awareness from donors in the community, having more awareness of the homeless services within the organization. Maybe it's an organization that has multiple types of services, and then they have a program specifically for the homeless population. Those donors kind of get to see more of the mission of the organization in those programs. And so it really is a win-win as far as financially and for the mission of your organization, being able to have HCTC as kind of a spotlight from the donor community for your organization. So I do have some quotes on the slide from a few different organizations, just sharing kind of these highlights as far as seeing deeper investment in their programs, seeing designated gifts to their shelter services. That last quote, Open Door Ministries, they saw for their qualifying programs, they saw an 82% increase. They previously did not offer a tax credit. And so last year was the first year where they offered the tax credit, and they saw a very large increase in donations for them. I've had a couple other organizations that have seen smaller percentage in increase, but increases. And so it really depends, on the organization and how you market the tax credit and your donor base being able to take advantage of it. Locations for HCTC, it's really anywhere within the state. And so this map does show a really high concentration in the Denver metro area, as you probably are not surprised, but we do have locations all throughout the state of organizations and projects that qualify. So we do have currently 96 operational services projects and 18 capital campaign projects. I'm going to explain what those mean on a later slide. But overall, almost 90 approved organizations for HCTC for this year. And so we're holding these sessions to hopefully encourage others to join as well if it's a potential good fit for your organization. Some participation requirements. So organizations must be a 501c3 nonprofit and maintain that status. They have to have good standing within the Secretary of State of Colorado. Operational services or capital campaigns must have a focus on homelessness. So in the case of prevention, that could be the people receiving your services might be at imminent risk of homelessness. But that primary focus, really based on our statute and the reason that HCTC was created, was specifically for those services for those experiencing homelessness. And so if that's a question for your organization, you're looking at the population you serve and you're not sure if it's a primary focus or not, it doesn't seem to meet the majority, maybe it's just a small portion. That's a question to really think through before seeking eligibility for HCTC. And if that's something where you want to reach out directly and have a conversation about, happy to do that so that you don't start an application and it turns out actually it looks like the primary focus is more of a broad population that you're serving. And so we're just looking at that specifically because of the statute and the purpose of HCTC. So your project location does determine the tax credit amount that you're able to offer. So those in urban areas can offer a 25% credit for a donation, and those in rural counties can offer a 30% donation. This is calculated based on the county level for USDA designations. And so yeah, we just look at the county where your organization is. Now, if your organization that maybe your headquarters, so to speak, is in a certain county, but you provide services in a rural county, that project, if you're providing services within that rural county, that's what really matters, is that project location specifically of where the services are being given, not necessarily the headquarters. So that's another aspect to think about as you're thinking about HCTC and the amount of tax credit that's going to be available for your donors. Any questions so far? Awesome. So project categories are important to look at. So we have 8 options for operational service categories, and these are indicated within our statute. And so we have outreach efforts. So a lot of times that indicates street outreach. So those who are not engaged in, regular shelter or housing services, but they're that you're seeking to engage them and engage and assist them. Then there's safe emergency, temporary, or transitional shelters. That does include day shelters or navigation campuses as well. Supportive housing refers specifically to permanent supportive housing, and there's a specific model for supportive housing that we look at. Employment outcome services that can include job training, assisting people in preparing for employment or receiving education credentials for that. Case management can be on its own or potentially in addition to some of these other services. So some people, maybe you have a shelter program that you provide case management as well. Maybe you would have case management as an add-on service with some of your other project categories. Or case management could potentially stand alone if you do focus within the homeless, those experiencing homelessness. We do also have a category for those with domestic violence shelter and services, specifically for that population. And as I mentioned earlier, prevention services are eligible if they're provided to those experiencing or at risk for experiencing homelessness. And so this would be, for example, eviction prevention, providing funds to someone who's got a demand for rent and they're about to be evicted, providing those funds so that they remained housed. That's an example of the services for that category. Then we have another category called other services identified as emerging, promising, or providing best practice. So this is kind of a catch-all for different services that don't fit within these other categories, but they are to the appropriate population for HCTC. and it's identified as something that's meeting the need of the community. If you are looking at the other service category, I would suggest reaching out just to confirm, how to potentially complete the application, or looking at what your service type, if it might fit um, within this category. Sometimes other services might be providing meals to those experiencing homelessness. Another example is there's a newer nonprofit that provides toilets to those experiencing homelessness so that they have a more hygienic place to use those facilities or those services. So those are a couple examples of other services, but if you have something else, we're always kind of surprised by the innovation that's happening. So feel free to reach out if you think you might be within that category. There's also the project category of capital campaign. So this is when you're trying to raise money for a building or renovation. And so these categories really focus on that. So if you're providing permanent supportive housing, would be supportive housing. If you're providing shelter, if you're providing facilities used to provide housing, so maybe you're building a transitional housing site, for example. Or if you are trying to renovate or build facilities that provide the administration for your operations, that also would qualify for a capital campaign. One detail related to capital campaigns that's important is that construction must begin within 3 years of approval. So if you're looking at potentially beginning construction in 5 years from now, submitting an application now would not be a good fit. You'll want to make sure you're going to be within that 3-year time frame. Going into more specifics on the project details. So projects are a specific part of the application. So we'll get into that in a little later, but it's important to think through how you might want to structure your projects for your organization. By statute, there is a tax credit maximum for your projects. Basically, we divide it within a primary project and then all remaining projects. So there is a diagram on the screen that this example nonprofit is a nonprofit that has 3 projects. So in this example, their project A can accrue up to $750,000 in tax credits. That would equal $3 million in contributions for this as an urban project with because they can give 25% in tax credit for their donations. So let's say, for example, this example nonprofit brought in $3 million as a cap for their first project, but they had 2 other projects as well. And those 2 projects could accrue up to $750,000 in combined credits for their organization. And so this is the case no matter how many projects you have in addition to your first primary project. So you're always, for that first project, you're always going to have a $750,000 cap. That second bucket, so to speak, of $750,000 in credits can be for 1 additional project or more. So we have some nonprofits with 2 projects. They have basically 2 buckets of $750,000 that they could issue in credits. And so we have some organizations with maybe 5 projects. So they have 1 bucket of $750,000 in credits for their first project, and then the remaining 4 have to share kind of that combined bucket of $750,000 in credits. I do go over this just in case. I know a lot of organizations are like, I wish we could fundraise that much to be able to give 750,000 in credits, because that's, you know, millions in income for your organization. Yeah, I do want to just go over this just in case your organization may be bumping it up against those maximums. Any questions regarding projects?
Brian, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we're approved for an initial project, is it possible to add on a second project later in the future? So for
Yes.
example, okay, so we provide emergency homelessness services now, first $750,000 bucket, but 5 years from now, we do want to build transitional housing. We reapply in 2 years to make that happen?
That's correct. Yeah, once you're an approved organization, you can add a new project for review, and that can be done on a rolling basis as well. So if you have a capital campaign come up in the next year or two, you could add that. That's a good
Perfect. Thank you.
question.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So if we, excuse me, get approved, can we go to an existing project? So we're in the middle of construction right now. Can we apply for credits for any contributions coming in from that date forward, even though construction started?
Yes. So it would depend on your date of approval, and as far as, you know, if those contributions could be submitted yet. But yes, even if your capital campaign has been going on for a while, you could submit a project for that capital campaign if it's still happening. We do have some dates coming up as far as deadlines for participation that I can share, but the answer to your question is yes. If the capital project has already started, but if you're still fundraising, you could submit that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions regarding projects? Awesome. So this next section, I'm going to talk about after someone's approved, kind of how it works regarding contributions and tax credits. And like I said, I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but I do want to give enough information so that you have an idea of what to expect if you were to participate. So regarding contributions, the first step is basically when a taxpayer donates to your organization, and they have a qualifying contribution. Basically, monetary donations must be $100 or more. In-kind donations must be appraised at over $5,000. Organizations may implement a higher minimum for those monetary donations if they choose. So some organizations started at $250 because they just get a lot of those $100 donations, and administratively, it's more of a big lift to have that as a lower threshold. I will also note that by statute, the tax credit is meant to foster that civic engagement at all levels. And so that's why that minimum donation is, you know, lower at $100. And so I do want to plug that, but we also do want to balance just the feasibility for organizations in that minimum contribution. Contributions submitted for HCTC must be restricted for those programs or services that are part of the HCTC project. So for example, if you have a general donation just made to your nonprofit, it's not noted specifically for your shelter, for example, that donation could potentially, you know, be eligible for HCTC if within your financials you show that donation went to the shelter budget and does qualify for HCTC. So So yeah, it could be a general donation to your organization, or it could be a donation specifically for a particular program that qualifies for HCTC. As long as budgetarily you funnel that donation to the appropriate program or services. And we do ask for donors to opt in to HCTC. So it's not like if you qualify for HCTC and you give the tax credit to every single donor, because some donors may not be interested in the tax credit for whatever reason. It's more of a process where the donor indicates that they want to opt into HCTC. They note it on the check that they submit to you. They note it within your online giving platform. Whatever that works for your organization, that communication stream. But this is something that you need to offer widely to all donors, but not all donors are necessarily going to request. So after you identify a contribution, this donor wants a tax credit, they gave $100 to your shelter, what next? That contribution is then submitted on HCTC's Salesforce platform. And so there are two ways actually to do that. Either the nonprofit can submit that as a manual entry, or the donor can submit that as a manual entry. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but we do give that option to you as a nonprofit on which works best for you. If you want your nonprofit staff to submit that, or if you want donors to submit that directly. We do ask for contributions to be submitted on a minimum quarterly basis if they meet that minimum donation threshold. And another note is that contribution information does include the donor's personal information and the details of that donation. And so in the past, I'm not sure if word got out, but our first year that included the full Social Security number of the donor. The legislation that was passed and implemented this year now allows that to be the last 4 digits of the Social Security number, or for business donors, that could be the full FEIN. Documentation must be submitted also as a note for contributions valued over $5,000. So that's either cash or in kind. If it's over $5,000, we do ask for that backup documentation to be submitted as well. So that's kind of the contributions aspect of the admin process. After a contribution is approved, then there's a tax credit certificate that's issued to the taxpayer.
I've got a question. A question. You mentioned the documentation for the donations over 5,000. What's included in that documentation? A copy of the check or a copy?
Yeah, it can vary based on the donation type. So it could be a copy of the check. It could be, some organizations have thank you letters where they include the amount, they include the check number, the person's name and address, they include the date of donation, some of those specific. And then for in kind, we do ask for a documentation of that appraisal. That fair market value of the in-kind donation is required.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So after that contribution is approved, it's in the Salesforce system, a certificate can be issued to the donor. And we do have 3 different frequency options for these certificates. And this is something you would want to think about before submitting your application. So certificates could be available immediately, quarterly, or annually. So some donors and nonprofits, they prefer that immediate cadence where they submit the donation and it creates a certificate right away that's able to be sent to the donor. Some, maybe you like to wait, on a quarterly basis when you submit your contributions, you would like to have that certificate available on a quarterly basis. Or some organizations prefer just having an annual certificate with all of the contributions, tax credits bundled on that one certificate. And so it really depends on your organization, what you prefer. Like I said previously, there was the enterprise zone tax credit, and some of the organizations within that, they were used to that immediate cadence. And so their donors were used to getting that certificate right away, kind of as an assurance of their tax credit. And so that's why some have more opted for the immediate cadence. Others see, you know, having just one certificate to keep up with is a lot easier. And so they prefer that annual cadence. It just depends on what your organization prefers. Just note that this does lock you into that for all of your donors for the 4 years of approval. So if you are approved for tax year 2025, for example, you would be locked into whatever certificate cadence you select for 4 years. And so that's just something you'll want to think about, discuss within your organization of what cadence works best for you, because it cannot be, it can't be customized per donor. So if you have a donor that's like, I want my certificate right now, but you selected the annual cadence, they're going to have to wait for that certificate until after the tax year is complete. So that's just something to really think about. Certificates are generated through Salesforce, so it's not something that you create. It's something that it's a document that's automatically available to you based on that time frame that you select. So after the tax credit certificate is available, basically it's you as the nonprofit by statute that issues that certificate. And so we have two options for you to either email it through Salesforce. And so it is a secure link that's sent within an email. And so that link, basically when the donor clicks on that link, they submit their last name and the last 4 of their tax ID, and they're able to access that certificate. So it's not an attachment through an unencrypted email or anything like that. It is a link that's sent from Salesforce. Or some donors do not have email or prefer just a hard copy. And so if that's the case, then you as an organization do need to actually print that certificate and mail it by snail mail to that donor. And then basically they take that certificate and they submit it when they file their taxes, and that's their proof to the Department of Revenue that the Division of Housing has, you know, approved their contribution as eligible. And so basically that final approval, so to speak, is from the Department of Revenue. When they receive that certificate, they either approve or deny that tax credit at that time. Any questions on the contribution certificate process?
I've got a question. As the nonprofit, are we keeping a copy of each of the certificates?
Not necessarily, no, especially, you know, without having the donor's personal information on the certificate, you may not want to do that. Whenever you log into Salesforce, it's going to have a copy of that available for you. You have a list of all of your tax credits there. So, and with a link to the certificate from the system. So you have a place where you can always access it at any time just by logging in.
So if the donor loses their certificate that we send out on that immediate basis, we can replace that certificate for them for their tax filing.
That's correct.
That was my, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, and I'm not looking at the chat, so Lonnie, if you can flag anything that comes up in the chat. I'll also talk about reporting. So I do share this just so that you have expectations of what we look at on an annual basis. So as I mentioned earlier, eligibility certification lasts for 4 years. Organization and project review happens each fall. So basically every year we're going to look at the information that you have submitted within the system. We're going to send it to you and we're going to ask, is anything changed? Do you still have the same main contacts at your organization? Does your project description, is that still accurate this year? Do you have any changes within your programming that we need to note within the system? So that's one thing that happens every year. And then we also have an annual report that's required by statute to include your project's outcomes and outputs. So this is not necessarily the financial, number of tax credits issued or anything like that. We can pull that information from Salesforce, or what we're looking for from you on the annual report is looking at your program data as far as the outcomes within the participants who have received services from you, and those outcomes like how many, just how many served for one thing, but hopefully looking at those housing outcomes and if people have been housed because of the services you've provided. A lot of that information is able to be collected and stored and reported on from the Colorado Homeless Management Information System. Some homeless providers do already use HMIS, and if that's you, that's great. That's awesome. You can just pull a report. We're able to pull a report there for a lot of our HCTC projects. If not, HMIS is not required, but it is strongly encouraged because of that. We are able to align a lot of our data and outcomes based on the HMIS reporting. And so we understand HMIS is not a great fit for every organization, but if it's not something you've looked into or looked into recently, we do encourage participation and usage of HMIS. Also a note that the division can monitor your financial records to ensure that HCTC contributions actually went towards the appropriate HCTC approved projects. And so basically just giving you a heads up, you could be audited for your HCTC contributions. All right, so that's all of the administrative process information I have. Now on to the eligibility application. So this is what if you're interested in HCTC, you'll need to complete this for review by our staff. So it is through the HCTC Salesforce system. And please only create one account per organization. So if you're an organization that maybe started an application last year and never completed it or something like that, please do not try to create a new account. There's only one account per organization. However, if you have multiple people you want to contribute to the application, you want more than one person to be able to log in and fill things out, we can definitely do that for you. After you register as an organization, if you have more than one staff that needs login access, please email us and we're able to send you an email or to set up a password for those additional users who need to access the system. I do want to highlight a few things regarding the application. I'm not going to go through every single application question or anything like that, because we actually have a document that shows you that. So this is our HCTC website. Hopefully you're able to, I'm sharing that. And so if you scroll down to information for organizations interested in participating in HCTC, we have a variety of materials here for you to assist you. So you have the link for our HCTC platform. And you also have some resources for developing your application. So this is a Salesforce guide that goes step by step through the application. And the eligibility verification checklist is very helpful. So it goes through the different fields and questions that are requested on the application, and kind of gives you some guidance on how to answer those. I'll also say that when you are completing your application, best practice would be to have a separate document where you're including your answers. The organization portion of the application does save when you click next, but the project portion does not. We're looking with our IT department to hopefully get that fixed soon if it's possible. But at this time, your project application is not going to save if you leave it and come back to it as a draft. It's gonna, all those questions are going to be blank. So I would encourage you to answer all of your questions on your own, have all of kind of like your own cheat sheet to be able to copy and paste those into the application at this time. But yeah, if you review this checklist and you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us. If you want to email us, we do have a general email address, dola_hctc@state.co.us, and you can ask those general questions there. Another piece that I think is important to highlight is that we do have a list of descriptions of our project categories. So as you're thinking through what your project types are, just go ahead and look through this. A common example of where folks sometimes get tripped up is the supportive housing. So like I said, supportive housing really, for the purposes of our reporting and categorization, is really specific for the permanent supportive housing model. And so sometimes someone might think they're providing supportive housing with services, but really it might fall more into either transitional housing or bridge housing or that type of service instead. So just really look at the descriptions here if you can, as you're selecting the project types and also creating your descriptions of your projects. Also a note, the eligibility application documents that we're going to ask for. So we do ask for you to submit 3 documents. One is this letter of good standing from the Colorado Secretary of State. One is a letter of support from your board of directors. And we also ask for your audited financials for your organization. If your organization, based on size or whatnot, you have never had an audit, then please submit your organization's financials as a document that you can upload within your application. Previously, you may have seen in the past requests for a letter of support for the continuum of care. That process we've changed this year. We at the Division of Housing, we reach out to the COC for that recommendation from them. And so you no longer have to contact the COC for a letter of support. That's something that we do on the back end just to streamline things. So I will go ahead and just very high level do a screen share of the Salesforce application on the platform. So once you register within Salesforce, this is what your home screen will look like. And say you started an application, now you're coming back to resume a previous application, you would be able to resume it here on your home screen. So you just click resume eligibility application. And like I said, the organization portion of the application does save, and you're able to come back and that information is already completed. It includes all of these questions where you have all of the information here. Most of these questions are required. This is where you're able to upload those documents that I just mentioned on the last slide of the presentation there. Then when you click next, this is the project portion of the application. So if you have more than one project for your organization, this is where you can submit more than one. So if you click next, this is filling out your information for one project. So if you're looking at operational services, you can actually combine multiple service types into one project application. So we have different organizations that do it differently. So some of them have divided out their operations based on program type or location. And it really depends on your organization if you want it all in one, or if you do want to separate it out. I would say most of the time it makes sense to just have it all combined in one project. If you offer case management and shelter and outreach with your organization, it might make sense to have all of those subcategories in one project. Sometimes it may make sense to have them separated out, especially with multiple locations. So if you're looking at services within an urban context, urban county versus services within a rural county, you might want to have those as two separate projects so you're able to offer that higher tax credit amount for the rural services. That's one example where you might want to have it separated out. If you get to this part and you're like, I just don't really know what the best option is for your organization, feel free to email that in my inbox and we can potentially set up a time to chat one-on-one on that if you do have a complex situation. But yeah, you're able to select multiple subcategories. You're able to select multiple counties for the project. And then these are the project questions that I'm not going to go in depth on, but you would complete all of these questions for the organization. So I'm going to go ahead and just put test information here so I can show you what the next portion looks like. And this is where you would indicate if you do want to have a donation that's higher than the $100, you would indicate that in this part of the application here. And so at this point, I've submitted or drafted one project. If I have another project, say I have operational services, but I also have a capital campaign for my organization, I would just select next and go ahead and submit another project for the capital campaign specifically. But say I'm done, I've submitted all the information for my projects, then you just select this little done checkbox right here and you select next. You're able to review all of the information for your organization and see the number of projects that you have to submit. You would select next, and then there's these attestations that we ask for your organization. So you would select basically a check mark is that you agree to these attestations, and then that's the final submission for your eligibility application. We do ask for 14 days to review that application, and so yeah, we're asking for submissions by October 15th. So that's our deadline that we're asking for. And so like the question was already asked, what if we have something to submit at a later date? That can be looked at on a rolling basis. And you know, if you don't make that October 15th deadline, That's not necessarily the end of the world. That's just what we're asking for so that we can have everything reviewed in time for the beginning of the tax year. So if you're looking at maybe you've tried to get it submitted, but things come up and you don't get it in until December, maybe the end of December. We at the Division of Housing may not be able to get that reviewed in time for you to have a start date of January 1st of 2025. And so just keep that in mind for the timeliness of your application. We ask for you to get that submitted in advance because we have found oftentimes that there are follow-up questions. So maybe there's something on the application we need more information on. We're going to reach out to you. Sometimes that back and forth does extend the time that it takes to review the application. And so that's why we have that October 15th deadline so that we can have everything up in plenty of time. By statute, we do have to have posted a list of participating organizations by November 1st for the following tax year. So that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at as a division. But we also understand, you know, you have questions, you have things you have to look into as an organization. And so just having that line of communication open with us, just please know that we have those materials on our website, but also reach out to us if those materials are not answering your question or you feel you have a specific situation for your organization. So thank you so much for joining today. I do appreciate Lonnie in the chat flagging if you have not included your email address to go ahead and do that so that we can follow up with you. And I think there was another question.
Well, I had a question about the project part of the application. You mentioned there was something that was not going to be saved, that we needed to have that information in like a Word document so we could cut and paste. What part of that was that the answers in the project section?
Yeah.
So
if you submit it, it saves. But if you, what I'm referring to is if it's in draft status. So if you're working on it, you leave and come back, it is going to be lost at this time. Yeah.
No, so really, when you fill it out, that's the time to hit submit. So if you're if you're preparing your document beforehand offline in Word, you do that. And then, hey, it's time to submit. We're going to fill that part out and hit the submit button.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Hi, good morning, all. I'm here on behalf of a pretty small organization, and so to your earlier comments around HMIS, is that a requirement for organizations to have to use or use in the future? Because I don't see that happening for us at all, ever, or at least not in the near term.
No, it's not required. So it is just encouraged, basically, is how we frame it. We encourage it because it does help with the reporting process, but we do understand that some organizations do not have the administrative capacity to participate in HMIS.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, we will be holding another information session in a couple of weeks for those who are unable to attend today, but definitely appreciate everyone on the call and for your thoughtful questions. And yeah, we look forward to the possibility of working with you in the future and really hope that HCTC can potentially be leveraged for your organization and your fundraising. So thank you so much for joining. And we'll go ahead and stop the recording.
Thank you.